Hello, I hope this finds you well and welcome to our latest Cardiff Life Business Club. It's a discussion with several leading figures in the Cardiff events sector. It's one of the last sectors to return in full and we wish everyone involved in events, both the companies, but all the freelancers, all the very best in the coming months. And we hope we'll get some interesting about how events are returning and what the new plans are, how they've been affected by these times. We'll shortly be speaking with our panel, covering various upcoming events and of course those insights. We'll start with Jill Manley, ICC Wales and Celtic Manor, then Fern Morgan, Gennaro Productions, actually our partner on the Cardiff Life Awards, and we'll talk about that as well in a moment, Nick Saunders of Depot, and Rhys Bloomberg of Cardiff Blues. So we're discussing their events, how they're faring, what their prospects are, what they've learned, what advice they have for others, and what just might be happening in the second half of this year and beyond. Please do send any questions using the Q&A button below. You can ask anonymously if you wish, or be named as you like. Add your company name to your questions, that'd be great. And note that, of course, the Business Club is once more being recorded and will also be available on our Cardiff Life YouTube channel this afternoon. Before we get going, a couple of points from Cardiff Life about what we've been up to and what our plans are in the coming times. Look out for our Cardiff Life business surgeries. These are different exercises. They're bespoke, deep dive sessions showcasing companies' expertise through discussion. Please talk to us about how you might be involved. We can all do with advice and of course generate new business. And the business surgeries will be continuing as virtual in the future and we think they'll have this enduring value available again via our Cardiff Life YouTube channel. On the awards, as mentioned, 30th of September, we're going to keep pushing that date, 30th of September at City Hall, the Cardiff Life Awards once more. The nominations, please get your noms in. Nominations close next Thursday, June 10 at 8 p.m. We have a later closing than usual. It's amazing how companies have, you know, the vogue expression is pivoted, but how they've responded to these times. And reading some of those nominations about how proud companies are of their teams, of how they've navigated through these times. It's incredibly heartwarming. Separate to that, it's incredibly impressive as well. Please do put your company forward. And of course, for many, it won't have been the best years. We know that, of course, but so do our judges know that. And they'll be looking for how you've responded, how you've navigated. It's of course free to enter via the website, Cardiff Life Awards. We've got a great roster of sponsors, including our platinum sponsor, Marsh Commercial, plus 13 fields who are new this year, Gennaro, Lexus Cardiff, and Lexus Cardiff will have some spectacular cars inevitably on the night, and we're really looking forward to that. Also, Park Plaza, Regis, WSET, and Cardiff Life, of course, itself. And if you're an ambitious company or one seeking to rebuild your business pipeline or just plain proud to be a leading Cardiff company, please do consider sponsoring. Everyone coming together, from the coolest of the indies to the largest of local companies, after this year of all years, will just be the best celebration of business in Cardiff. Our Cardiff Property Awards, again, back in real life on 26th November. It's a long way away, but we're keen to flag it right now at the Coal Exchange. Many months of marketing, lunchtime and afternoon event, and yet it'll be the biggest gathering of property and pro services companies since some pre-lapsarian days of, God knows, 2019. And we're having a Cardiff Property Awards launch Monday, 28th of June. So you can hear any need-to-know information ahead of the awards returning this November. And yes, of course, sponsorships are available. There is one more that we want to draw your attention to, which is EntreConf, which is our new event for entrepreneurs in the region, the wider region. Entrepreneurs are absolutely central to Cardiff. New ways of looking at the world, new business models, new services, products, jobs, great opportunities for advisors, investors, financial companies, lawyers, academic institutions, marketing agencies, so many more. So this is why we've launched EntreConf, the Entrepreneurs Conference. The future is unwritten, as it says there. It's virtual on July 1st. It's pitched at startups and scale-ups, all different levels of entrepreneurialism. Some may even be what are called the future corns, the big breakout value players in the years to come. We're aiming to give, some really profound insight and valuable inspiration, bringing together partnerships and celebrating the contribution of entrepreneurs. Talk to us about being involved, from speaking to perhaps sponsoring. Just yesterday, we've got confirmation that one of our keynotes will be from Dale Vince, who, if you don't know, Google him, an extraordinary man, idiosyncratic green energy entrepreneur. He owns Ecotricity. He also runs Forest Green Rovers with eco values from the wooden stadium all the way through to the players and the fans' diets. A maverick entrepreneur, and there's a couple of other big names as well we'll be announcing shortly. There'll be also, we're unveiling some exclusive research about entrepreneurs, as well as giving practical advice for startups, much more, and so on. We've got an interesting structure that enables a certain number to go for free, courtesy of our sponsors. There are a few free tickets available now on the site at EntreConf, courtesy of those sponsors. And please do join. It'll just be a great opportunity, because the future is unwritten, of course. One last, at the heart of all we do in Cardiff is Cardiff Life. We're just so proud to publish a magazine that celebrates the very best of this incredible city. When we were unable to publish in those dark days of 2020, we really felt the sadness of not being able to be there to play our part. But we've been roaring back, and it's superb to see the support we've had. We're here to celebrate the good stuff. We thank you for your support. Okay, let's do this. Let's bring forward our event speakers, all different things, long-awaited activities, and it now looks as though Cardiff is scheduled to be once more burgeoning number of events, teeming with events. First up, let's hear from Jill Manley, Commercial Director of ICC Wales and Celtic Manor. As Jill is coming to screen. Hello, Jill. Good morning.
Hi, Greg. Good morning.
Yeah, I'll just give a couple of details for those who may not know full detail. So the ICC, the International Convention Centre, 4,000 square metre pillar-free exhibition hall, 1,500 seat auditorium, meeting rooms, breakout, networking, etc. As it happens, for obvious reasons, ICC Wales has actually been closed for far longer than it was open following its launch in September 2019. And clearly you've been busy planning many things. But one other thing with Jill is that you chair the Event Wales Industry Advisory Group, working well for the government. So you've got a sort of bigger picture perspective as well. So I wonder if we could start with that bigger approach. I mean, how would you give us some sense of scale of importance or economic importance to the city? And also, how would you characterize the current approach from the various stakeholders you deal with?
Okay, thanks, Greg. So obviously I sit on Events Wales Advisory Group, as Greg said. I am the chair, but it's divided into three sectors, which is business events, which I head up, and also the chair, arts and culture, and live events and sporting events. So events in Wales, we all come under the same sector and reporting into the same minister. So on that board, we are, since last June, when it was actually put together by the Welsh Government, and we are the voice into the Welsh Government and to the ministers of what is actually happening out in the wider Wales, and we are well represented on that. And I think probably the frustrating part of it is that I've been on that board and I've chaired it for over 11 months now, is that we seem not to be moving forward. Events are still closed. We didn't have opening as hospitality did last summer, and events now have been closed for 434 days. And it's not just the impact that has, as we all know, on conference centres, on art theatres, it's also on the wider community, the freelancers who struggle to get furlough and expenses paid, to the suppliers into it, and that supplies from the food and beverage to the audio side of it. And having that closure has had a big effect. We meet once every 6 weeks, sometimes ministers there, sometimes not, all dependent. And basically what has come out from Wales, as we all know, because we all live here, is that 2 metre social distancing is law. We have always worked on data. We're never given a timeline or a roadmap for hospitality opening or for events, and a very, very cautious approach compared to England and Scotland now, who have a timeline. So being closed and with no sort of light at the end of the tunnel of what our future will hold has been the hardest thing for, I think, the event industry, as we all know, in Wales, and knowing that our counterparts in England and Scotland are opening. And to the effect now that it is having a negative effect on us, in that England, though that June the 21st date is out there, and events know they can go ahead. And yes, lots of conversations around Indian variant. I think there was a new Nepal variant this morning mentioned on the news, and also mentioned on the news. They're not going to call them Indian and Nepal now. They're going to call them Alpha, Delta, everything else. If those variants coming along. But England and Scotland have that timeline, have something to it, to albeit differently. England work on 50%, Scotland on numbers. So we are losing events. I've had 3 events for the Celtic Manor, large events, cancel for July, and they're actually going ahead and moving ahead in England in July, because there is that timeline there. So that has been really difficult for the events industry across Wales, from the business side, from arts and festivals, the Royal Welsh Show, which is the biggest festival for Wales, which is our homegrown festival, cancelled last year, cancelled again this year, and hopefully they want this Christmas event, but will that be able to happen? Because without guidelines, they need to actually start on sale in July.
If I could just come in on this. So, of course, for all the reasons you're saying, there is inevitable caution and caveats about certainty in all the various aspects. But nonetheless, do you have a excuse me, some sort of working assumption about when events might be? And there's no guarantee at all, but might be back in the real world.
The short answer to that, Greg, is no. We push it all the time. I was on a call yesterday, and really I asked for that timeline, because with hospitality, obviously the Celtic Manor has a hotel which is full to our social distancing capacities for the next 10 days, to the point that we even had to put it on our website that we're full, because people are still phoning to come. So they were always given a 3-week review, and you had 3 weeks notice to open up. With events, as we all know, 3 weeks is not long enough for the planning. I have events in September that want to come on menu tastings, that want to talk about planning, but with no real date that, this is the date you'll open, as England and Scotland do. We really struggle. And for concerts, anything that's happening, you'll see Celtic Manor, the Vale, are actually selling Christmas party nights, and people think I know something that somebody else doesn't know, but really we have to do that as your events are going ahead later in the year, because without that, we will never be able to turn it around quickly. So we live in a lot of hope that will happen. We live in constantly pushing and living, you said, what does it bring to the economy? The share of corporate conferences in Wales, in the UK, is 20.2 billion. It's 350 million in Wales. And then there's the economic impact of that, which taxi drivers, restaurants are missing without these people actually coming into Wales. We tweeted the other day that we won a conference in 2024, and the reply on the tweet was, oh, will you let us across your borders? So there is negativity out there. There's also positivity on the other side, because you always have two sides to every coin. And there are people that are saying, well, Wales is safer because you've been more cautious. We've got a higher percentage of vaccination than England. So it is that balance all the time. And then it is down to personal view. Where do you personally feel safer? Booking a conference, go into a conference, or go into an event? There is that side as well. So with your question, which is, do I have sight of the future? No. There is obviously a review coming out tomorrow, and they've said there could be something on events on that, but they never know until actually the minister gets up and says, right, this is what I'm going to do.
And as an underlying point, do you think that lack of alignment between Wales and England, and there's no value judgment about, which is better or more cautious or more sensible, the lack of alignment causing the particular problem as you've defined it, that of itself will help create further pressure politically to actually bring some degree further alignment, or at least clarity?
Yeah, without the alignment and clarity, we're confusing the consumer. And yes, we live in Wales, so we see Welsh news. Yet if you're in England, I talk to clients who have no clue that we have different guidelines. Some of our guidelines have been better. Our table of 6 was a mixed family, mixed people, whereas in England it was 2 families. But people come across the border, especially us being so close, and they're confused with what the rules are, what are the regulations. And with conference, our clients believe we're on the same guideline as England, because they watch that news, they listen to Boris talking, and they think, right, this is the same everywhere else. And the guidelines, we need clarity across the board, because we are the UK. We go out to trade shows abroad and sell the UK. We don't sell ourselves as separate islands, separate entities. We go united, hence United Kingdom, and that is really what I push for. But there is very much pushback in, we are Wales, we will follow Wales guidelines.
Yeah, and inevitably the obvious proximity, it's the nature of any border, but the amount of people who live in one and work in the other, or alternatively trade in both or whatever, it's multiple, and that confusion must of course cause difficulties. Now, come to a different point. Resilience and adaptability have absolutely been the hallmarks of the sector, as elsewhere. What practical help has been secured for the sector, and particularly the point you referenced about freelancers, some presumably falling between the cracks?
So for the sector there, we've had the Culture Recovery Fund, we had RFT. Cultural Recovery Fund is now on the second stage, and talk about the third stage. But it was really, the paperwork for that was quite onerous for the bigger companies. Smaller companies, not so bad. But there was talk about the people that did fall through the cracks and to apply for things, and did they know there was funding out there. Welsh Government said there was funding for all and they could get it, but when you looked at what it was £2,000 enough for being closed for the amount of time they were closed. Being in a job was much better, 80% furlough across the board. So it was those freelancers that, I felt for, and they really had to turn their hand to different things. But I think event people are resourceful people, and it's been really heartwarming and good to see all the different things people have done, whether that is been getting different jobs or actually doing things, looking at the guidelines and thinking, what can I do to be safe within those guidelines and to work. For us at the Celtic Manor during lockdown, we took 2 behind closed door events, which I wouldn't probably have taken at any other time due to low revenues, but that was just to keep Celtic Manor and Wales' name out there.
Sorry, just out of interest, what are behind closed doors events?
So where no general public are allowed. So we took snooker. And we took the European tour. So they were behind closed doors. The hotel was actually a bubble hotel. But to get even those events on board, lots of work with local councils and with Welsh Government signing off. We have the European tour again in July. And again, we're unsure how will that look. Can they have hospitality? Can they not have hospitality? So everything is very last minute. And for us as events people, we are very resourceful, but you need that timeline, you need the planning.
Well, I'm sure the points you've mentioned there absolutely resonate with everyone in events, including our own events team, where, however confident and how much planning there is, it still has to be an element of contingent until we know for certain that X or Y may be able to happen. Jill, we'll call you back in a moment for the panel session, but for now, thank you very much. And with you and with all others, all the best in these times. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks. Let's hear from Fern now, Client Services Manager of Genero. Fern, how are you this morning?
Hi, Greg. Hi, everyone. Yeah, good, thanks.
Good. And just as a quick backdrop to Genero, event presentation, production solutions, huge diverse range of clients through the UK, and stresses the UK. Service from, I don't know, installation of exhibition display systems, plasma screen hire, manufacture of bespoke sets, creation of corporate videos, planning, production, etc., including, as mentioned, the Cardiff Life Awards. So we all have our fingers absolutely crossed for that, and indeed all your other activities. Tell us this, Fern, how far has digital, or at least virtual, been a saviour for you?
Absolutely incredible for us. So, as with the entire industry, the rug got pulled in a day, literally. Luckily, we already had a streaming infrastructure set up from the international events that we do and streaming those across the world. So we already had a small bit of knowledge about how to get that up and running. And then just a massive learning curve, huge learning curve for us and for clients alike as well, and trying to coach clients through their options, the solutions that are available to them, which is an absolute minefield and still is, and finding the best fit to turn in those live events into hybrid virtual events moving forward.
And have you done much that's hybrid in currently? Obviously, the caveat about Wales, any form of live event, but elsewhere. And how does that hybrid work? Talk us through perhaps a couple of examples.
Yeah, so luckily filming has been allowed pretty much throughout lockdown, and hybrid events fall under that. So you can film people, and that's how we've been able to get around it. So last week, for example, we were at ICC with Jill's team. We did a huge congress. There was a top table of 5 people, obviously all socially distanced. So a huge 34-foot set, whereas usually it could have just been, I don't know, 10 meters or so, something like that, and a couple of lecterns. We had 250 remote callers dialing into Congress, talking both ways to top table, and then streaming that out onto YouTube, which was just phenomenal. That's the biggest one we've done. We've done lots of award shows and things where we've had hosts and sponsors live in studios and swapping in and out of stages that then get streamed, and you're like, you guys do have finalists on Zoom and bring them in and out. All the magic that goes on behind the scenes.
All the magic goes on, and sometimes furiously pedaling below the surface in front of it. Apparently smooth, but I stress apparently. So, going forwards, how significant do you think that virtual element or hybrid element will be to live events?
I think there's always going to be an element of streaming now and hybrid, certainly in the short term future hybrid. I think with social distancing, venues that could maybe have done 400 people for dinner, for example, talking about awards, you may have to cut capacity down to 200 and then stream online. But the thing that we're finding at the moment is the experience for online delegates and online guests needs to be similar or as close to and as engaging as being sat in a physical venue at that live event.
Let me just boomerang that back to you live then. So how do you achieve that? How do you make it, it's not the same, but how do you make it sufficiently comparable that it has value?
I think you do interaction both ways. So have some people on Zoom ready to be posted up into the live event on big screens and vice versa, and just make sure that there's loads of interactivity with the host, and they're mentioning all the online delegates and all the online guests, sponsors, making sure they get a decent ROI on their sponsorship level, giving them drinks receptions, for example, that in the virtual sense and in the live sense that can talk to each other and just as inclusive as possible. There's ways to do it, and there's loads of platforms that are able to do it as well. So I think moving forward, certainly short-term hybrid, long-term streaming, 100 million%.
100 million%. I don't think I've ever had a number quite as big as that, but there we are. So again, tell me this. So in a sort of parallel, but not quite the same world, we were speaking with the Bristol Old Vic the other day about how they've priced their offering, because it's much as you say, they have obviously constrained capacity in their theatre, but then a longer tail streaming. When you're talking with events organisers, what do you give guidance, or do you have views about how the relative pricing might work between being there and watching it at home? Yeah,
definitely. It's the short answer is hybrid costs more. So live will cost, say, £10,000 live can cost. Virtual will cost there or thereabouts. Hybrid is a mixture of the both. So you still need all of the live elements, all of the live production, because that experience in that room needs to be exactly the same as anything else, as it would in normal times. Hybrid, then you need to add additional kit in to push it out, so it's all additional things, and that's where we're coming up at the moment. Lots of tenders we're putting in for the end of the year, for example, are asking us for 3 different options: a hybrid, a live and a virtual, which takes up resource from our side, but that's what's got to happen at the moment, unfortunately. And a big thing for us at the moment is getting into venues and educating venues as well, so they have a little bit of experience, they can talk some of the options, and then we're there on the end of the phone for any progressing conversations then. And I think that's really important, because there is going to be a certain expectation on venues to know how it can happen.
So that's from the events company's point of view, and how you liaise with them and how you advise them and the venues. What about the attendees in terms of the relative pricing between being there on the night and watching it at home? Do you typically advise a price for that, a charge for that, and what would be the ratio perhaps between them?
I think it's all perceived value, Greg, for the event. I think depending on event content, so things like conferences, I think it's a lot easier to charge online delegates, because they're going to get content, they're going to get knowledge. It's the what's the word I'm looking for?
Value.
Yeah, it is. It's that
Things
it's that
like,
it is that perceived value. Yeah, it is.
yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
awards and things are a little bit more difficult, I think, because it's a nice thing to do. It's nice to be involved in. I think the pricing structure for nominating an award and being involved in that award and the brand association of being involved with that award, that's where the value is, rather than watching it on a stream and being in that hybrid environment. That's my personal thoughts anyway.
Yeah. Okay, and what about the challenges for you personally or for your team, sort of having to reskill in real time? How have you approached that?
Oh, Greg, I can't tell you how many times I cried last year. Honestly, thinking whether it's me, whether I still wanted to do it, could I deal with 2 years of being sat on Zoom? You know what I'm like. I'm out and about and chatting to people, and I'm not a chained to a desk person, as and Jill and Reese well know as well. But no, had to stick to it, had to reskill, had to get involved, sleeves up, and everybody has just had to work together to get through it. And that's really what it's been. Pete, our MD, and Shanks have been facilitating Zoom calls. We've all had training. We're all doing everything at the moment, which is really good fun as well.
It is, you know, we've all of us, all different sectors, we've all learnt new skills, new approaches, and we've thought more deeply about our companies and our clients and our relationships. Not necessarily the learnings we'd have wished, but we'll come on to learnings in a moment. For now, thank you very much. And as with you, with all others, all the very best in the coming months. But we'll bring you back in the panel session in just a sec.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. But next up, it's Nick Saunders, the Director of Depot. Talking of, you know, doing all that's possible, working hard and so on, you've been exactly the same as others. Again, Depot, I know, is widely known, but just a couple of points about it. It began as a pop-up street food venue in 2014, and Nick, you were then 23 at that point, and you know, you've had quite the baptism, I guess, in recent times. You moved to a larger venue, 300k invested in that relocation. And then you're also festival director for Depot in the Castle, Depot in the Park, Depot Live, and so on. So how are you doing, Nick? How have you been?
Yeah, all good, thanks. Yeah, I think we've been one of the fortunate ones, I suppose, in this sector. When the ability has been there for us to open and the restrictions have allowed us to, we've been very fortunate to have space with our venue to socially distance and put on events. And I know that I feel for the rest of some of the other people who are on this call who are not in the same boat as us and aren't as fortunate. But yeah, we've managed to try and do what we can when we can.
And when you couldn't do so much, how did you keep the brand alive? What did you do? But partly internally to keep spirits up, but really externally keep away.
Yeah. So I mean, when we went into lockdown last March, we tried to make a point of trying to keep the brand being aware. So we launched some online quizzes that we've done, and even internally we've got 60 part-time staff and 15 full-time staff. So trying to keep them engaged. I was doing Zoom fitness classes with all the staff to try and keep them motivated, and obviously waiting for the day that we could open again. But yeah, in terms of the brand, we were doing the quizzes, trying to get engagement online where we can, just to keep the brand relevant.
And map out how, you know, with all the caveats about, as we talked earlier, but map out what this summer, even the autumn, might look like in comparison with previous years or what you might otherwise have done.
I think we're still as Jill mentioned, we're still very much in the hope that things can happen. Obviously, we're waiting for some guidance from Welsh Government to whether we can have outdoor events to a large scale this summer. So obviously we've got events in the castle. We've got 5 shows planned for this summer. Over 40,000 tickets already sold for these shows, and that seems
sorry, just on that ticket point, are tickets on sale at the moment, or are you waiting?
Tickets are on sale. Some events have sold out. Some events have sold out from 2018. Sorry, were sold in 2018 for 2019 for 2020. Getting mixed up by years, but
It's easily done.
yeah, and we've had to roll those tickets over. But I think a lot will depend on where Boris goes with his next announcement, and obviously there's a little bit of hesitance about this 21st of June date. I'm hoping that if he does go ahead and he does allow things to happen in England, there'll be some real social unrest if he doesn't. And likewise in Wales, if it's happening in England and not in Wales, yeah, there'll be social unrest here for those types of events.
There appears to be, you know, as of perhaps almost now, which may not be the case tomorrow, there appears to be a broad consensus that the unlockdown of 21st of June probably won't be to the full extent, obviously, but the political capital that's been invested in that date rather than data means that something pretty material has to happen on June 21st. That appears to be the current momentum. Do you buy that? Yes,
I mean, we're sort of the grumbles that we've been hearing from certain people in the industry is potentially that there's going to be a need for still certain restrictions. It might be that, for example, everyone still has to wear a mask, or there's still a track and trace system. Whether they'll get rid of social distancing completely, I don't know. Who will know? I mean, without going too political on this, obviously Boris has made some big heavyweight commitments to what he said about opening on the 21st, and whether he wants to stick with them or go back on his word, who knows. But yeah, we're all...
In that respect, it sort of parallels the run up to Christmas, where the absolute complete commitment to Christmas happened as normal, and then it fairly rapidly didn't. But we should all see, I guess the big date for everyone currently is June 14th, and that's when they will announce what might happen. And then, of course, the Welsh Government will take its own decision about what's appropriate. Just one last few at this stage, of what you've done during this lockdown or this extended period. How much of what you've done in that period might endure on, you know, the other side eventually?
So when we first started out in 2014, we were a street food market as a pop-up, as you mentioned. And as the years went on, we felt that market got quite saturated. So we moved towards more doing event-led stuff, doing more live music events and whatnot. Because of social distancing and because of the restrictions without live music at the time, going back to what we first started out as the street food, has really opened my eyes up again to what is a market still there. So I think there's definitely going to be more of what we're doing currently past lockdown restrictions. In terms of the sort of things that we're implementing, from ordering from table service via an app, we've definitely seen an uplift on sales because of that, albeit it's a little bit more strenuous on terms of a bit more heavy on the staff. I think there's some good points to take out of what we've had to adapt and change to that we'll move forward with. Yeah, that constant openness to adaptation is such a key feature of your business and so many in events. Nick, for now, thank you very much. We'll bring you back in a sec. Thank you. Cheers. Thank you. Thanks. Let's bring in our final speaker, Rhys Bloomberg, Chief Operating Officer of what's currently called Cardiff Blues and soon won't be Cardiff Blues, with the rebrand to Cardiff Rugby in a couple of months' time or so. Little bit of background. Sorry, Rhys. Good morning. Hello. For those, a bit of context that Cardiff Blues, publicly, there's the issue of a £5 million loan that was taken. That, like all loans, will have to be repaid back in some form. And of course, survival for any large entity with the complete lack of revenue for much of the time has been a real challenge. But you have the preeminent position and so much support through the city. When you can fully come back, you'll be much loved and in a very strong position, I'm sure. It's just a question of when and how. But tell me, how's it been for you this last year, professionally, perhaps also personally?
Yeah, good morning, Greg. Interesting, actually. I was over in Hong Kong for 18 months working for the rugby union there, and I came back to the Cardiff Blues in February of 2020. So I landed literally just before the pandemic hit the UK. Wow. It was lucky, actually, that I left the Blues to go to Hong Kong, was able to come back into that environment and knew the staff and stuff, I guess. It was an immediate requirement for some pretty difficult discussions and conversations, and also we had to become, I guess, the whole product stopped. And not only does that mean that our TV revenues were in jeopardy of being paid, all our obvious sort of incomes were jeopardized by the fact that we had no crowds, hospitality, etc. But also at that point, after a few months, there was a real lack of clarity in terms of what support we were going to be getting from any government funding or union funding. So there was a real nervousness around the future for professional rugby in Wales for a period of about 3 months, where we had to make some really tough decisions as a game in sort of across Wales, not just at the Cardiff Blues. But we had to make some decisions on how we were going to move forward from a business perspective and what we were going to do to, I guess, adapt and sort of create an environment where we could survive the situation that we were in. That meant pay cuts for players and staff. That meant all sorts of different panic lending conversations across a number of different channels. But as you mentioned at the start of the introduction there, we did secure a loan for £5 million from NatWest Bank, which isn't on particularly strong terms, to be honest, compared to the other regional sort of unions in England and Scotland. So that's currently being negotiated for Welsh Government to potentially step in and take care of that loan, and then we will owe the Welsh Government the money as opposed to a bank, and that could be potentially set on more favourable terms for us to repay the loan. And then thereafter, there was some other support come through via a grant from Welsh Government, which has played a big part in helping us press on. And the fact that we were able to play games from August behind closed doors meant that we were able to sort of continue to receive TV revenue and participation revenue from our league, etc. So it wasn't as bad as it could have been.
How has that behind closed doors experience been for the players and the staff? In comparison with the roaring crowd sort of surging on the teams and so on. It's a very strange experience watching on television, but what's it actually like in the stadium where you can hear the players, I guess? Well,
the first thing I'd say is it's definitely something that should only be shown after sort of 8 or 9 o'clock at night, because the language is pretty disgusting. Funny, when you're watching a game and there's a crowd, you don't hear anything on the pitch at all. Even be stood in the front row and you still don't hear anything. But with no crowd, you hear quite literally everything, from messages from coaches to players shouting at each other and sort of having to go at each other about different mistakes that are made and different bits and bobs. So it's quite intense. I think what I noticed quite quickly was that the Irish and Scottish teams and other teams that we play from different countries are quite vocal compared to the Welsh teams, or at least they were at that point. And they celebrate every little win. If there was a knock on, or if there was anything actually, they would just scream and shout and try and create atmosphere on the pitch. Welsh teams have definitely become more vocal over the season. I've noticed that. But there's no question. I mean, professional sports people, I know a lot of them personally, as I'm sure other people do on the call, and obviously a heck of a lot of them professionally as well. Those guys quite literally feed off a crowd. So that they take part in professional sport or a large part of it anyway, is that buzz, that excitement, that experience that they get from being on the pitch and having the crowd support them. So you take that away and it becomes very much like playing at Pontcanna Fields or playing somewhere else in the city where there is no crowd, which does change the dynamic of the sport. Standard of the performance is still there. I think there's been some pretty good rugby this year, but it's just that bite and that experience that comes with playing in front of a crowd, and what that brings, especially playing at home in tough situations where you're 50-50 on a win. If you've got that sort of 16th man who's the crowd, you do find yourselves in a situation where you'll have a bit of an Indian edge on your opposition.
Yeah. And what's, again, with all the caveats and so on, just talk us through what the timeline might be in terms of crowds coming back, what the capacities might be. What are your sort of working assumptions?
So much to sort of Jill's point at the outset, we've had some real difficulty trying to clarity from the government in terms of what the plan is for crowds to return. I know there were some trial matches and they continue to flow in Wales, but if you look at our counterparts over the bridge in England now, they've got access to 10,000 fans and they create an atmosphere that is pretty special for the players to finish their season. We don't have that clarity here. In fact, we don't know anything about when we're going to be able to have crowds at the Arms Park at this point. We've made the assumption, much again to Jill's point, that by September we'll be able to have crowds in some sort of normal capacity. We're not really sure on that, but we had to make a bold decision to go on sale. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to prepare in the same way that the Celtic Manor wouldn't be able to prepare for everything that with having crowds. So we've gone on sale. Can't quite sort of stress how amazing it's been, the uplift in sales compared to last time we were on sale. It's 4 or 5 times as much for the first 3 weeks of sales since we've gone on sale with season tickets. We've launched hospitality for next year and we've seen a huge uplift in interest in people buying hospitality from September. And we're looking to run British Lions events at the end of July and the start of August in the marquee at the Arms Park. And the uptake on those available spaces in the last week has just been phenomenal. So we're really confident that if the government let us, we can really benefit from that appetite for live sport and live events. It's just a case of us having a green light from the government to go ahead and do these things.
Give or take that sort of experience. And by the way, it must be just so gratifying after this dismal time to see the support that you've got, support at an emotional level, but of course support financial level. But give or take, that seems to apply pretty much across from hospitality to arts to sports to events, that when people can, their desire to join in is yet greater. And I guess to that extent, it's pretty gratifying to know that what you do, what the others do and so on, is regarded as highly as it is.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm trying to take all the credit for it, to be honest, and work for that. The reality is that there's actually a number of different positive things happened in Cardiff Blues. The rebrand has been really well received locally in Cardiff and the surrounding area. We've got Di Young back as director of rugby. We've got more players in the Welsh squad than we've had for the last 10 years. So it's not just the fact that COVID's happened. I think there's other factors, but you can't deny that the speed of sale for season memberships for next season has been unrecognisable, really. I mean, we are absolutely inundated with requests. We're not being able to get through them fast enough. We've had to go to a fully digital service because of COVID and staffing and different things, which has caused some issues, but we've overcome the majority of them. But every day there's a backlog of hundreds of emails coming in asking questions about renewals, when they can buy first-time season tickets. So yeah, we're delighted with that, and we just hope so much that we're able to deliver the product in September and get people along to the games. And if we can't, then I guess we'll go back to plan B and see what happens next, but that's the plan.
Yeah, and I guess professional sports people particularly are extremely adept at taking the positives. You know, whatever has happened on the pitch, whatever's happened in the season, whatever happened with the pandemic, there will always be positives, and you've articulated several there. So, Bruce, if you stay on now, we'll bring back our other panel members, if we may, if we join back. Thank you and hello again. I'm going to ask you this question. Of course, it's been an unimaginably difficult time for all sorts of events, and still is. And you know, there is light, but it's not there yet. Everything from whether you'd survive at a fundamental level to all the stuff about rescheduling. But what have you learned when you look back, when you reflect on this time? What have been your key learnings? Jill, if I could perhaps prompt you on that.
Thanks, Greg. I think the key learnings for me were, you know, Fern talked a lot about technology, as did Reese and Nick. But one of my key learnings is just really people. You need the people behind that technology and the people wanting to actually do it. As Fern said, I know she likes to be outside. She had to change completely. So there were people that were at home, furloughed, working from home. I was lucky to be in the office all the time. And it was how we all adapted to it and how we adapted quite quickly for it. And also working with my clients, I've moved quite away from actually talking to clients, working more on the commercial side of the business. But in that time, I went back to talking to the clients and really just being there for them and talking about things I probably wouldn't have before, dogs and home life. And to me, it was that human interaction that you had. And yes, you can have all the technology, you can have all of that in the world, but it is really that human interaction that really shone the light, as you saw it across from the NHS clapping everything. And that's what you need. And that is why when we're allowed back open events, as we said, him selling tickets, Nick is already open, that people will come back because Zoom technology is not everything. You need that human interaction. On the second thing I learned, probably, I'm a very pen and paper girl. I like everything around me, and I had to go more into technical, and that was hard for me. But it's something I know, but I don't want to live my life like it. I want to actually be able to sit down and talk to somebody and really have that eye contact as well. So technology will never replace what we do in events, is probably what I learned. And did I know that before? I probably did. But you have people out there who'll say, oh no, you know, Welsh Government is very much working at home. And yes, that is fine for some, but what it actually does to you, you need to get out there and interact with people. And then it probably makes you a little bit scary about getting out for that first time. But once you're out, we ran a pilot event here on the 20th of May, and that morning it was like I was back to my first event. And I've run lots of events over my 20 years, and the fear was there. But once you're back on the bike, you're riding, you're zooming along, and there's lots of people to help you if you should fall off the bike, and I'm not a great bike rider, so I'm not really sure why I did that analogy. I need my
It's very much like a much bigger version of the first day back to school in September each year or something. The sort of expectation, hesitation, excitement. Once you're over the hump, it's very quickly normative, I guess. How about some other learnings elsewhere beyond stuff we've talked about already? What have been your key takes in this time?
I think from our perspective, I think what we probably had to do is try and develop new products to try sort of that are outside the box to generate revenue from a business, from our sort of corporate and commercial side. And I think we looked at our partners and identified some that that we could help through ways and means that aren't necessarily traditionally associated with professional sport. So it does come back, I guess, to a certain degree to digital stuff, but it was kind of trying to create content that both of us would benefit from that was very interesting. For example, we ran a My Rugby Journey concept with Land Rover as an example, and we went back and looked at 3 key players' rugby experience right the way through their childhood into where they are today, but very much linked that back to Land Rover's brand. It was all recorded in a Land Rover. Sam Warburton became our host, who's a Land Rover ambassador. And we just basically had a really sort of new way, I guess, of generating some real value for Land Rover as a partner that isn't necessarily associated with having their brand on TV, on our shirts, on our stand, or whatever else that we do for them on a normal season, I guess. So I think we pivoted. I know that word's been used, but I think we did and sort of did that with 6 or 7 of our partners to try and create new value that we can now continue to do, and perhaps as we get back to normal and we can go back to traditional means of generating the value that we always have, we can look at some additional revenue for that value, which is a great thing for us and gives us new opportunity moving into a new COVID-free world, I guess.
Let's come on to the area of reassurance that whatever the strictures are, and yes, they keep changing, whether it's social distancing, masks, whatever, excuse me, all capacities. How do you reassure all of your customer base in very different ways beyond that formal point at an emotional level? How do you reassure them they'll be safe with you?
Is that for me?
For anyone.
All right.
No, actually,
Nick, you should come in here because you're doing.
Yeah, I was going to say, So I mean, from a policies perspective, obviously we've done some vigorous sort of detail in terms of risk assessments from a COVID perspective, and we've implemented all the social distance regulation stuff in terms of temperature checking on the front door, the booking systems. All these things are, like you say, are sort of regimented formal things that you put in place, but you still can't take away from the fact that when someone meets a member of our staff on the front door, they feel reassured that they do feel safe. We always meet when you book a table for our street food social events. We always have a member of staff that will welcome on the door, take them to the table, give them a pamphlet about what is the COVID regulations in our venue, why we are quite strict on them, and why we need to try and uphold them to as much as we can. Because at the end of the day, it's not only the customer safety, it's our staff safety as well, and making sure they feel comfortable coming to work. So yeah, the various things I've discussed, but I think you can't take away from the fact that personal sort of touch when you do have a customer who might have not been out for 14 months, for example, people have been shielding, and they want to feel reassured. So yeah, you've got to try and do everything you can to make sure they feel safe and welcomed in the venue.
I guess at the heart of it for all of your offerings is a sense of trust that these people, this company, their brand, their track record, or whatever, they're going to be sensible, they're going to be reasonable, and it's going to be a good experience thereby. And to that extent, the goods that you have each done in all the years prior, that's been the grain store that you can use going forwards. That's your brand, your reputation, that you are trusted, essentially. It's hard to put that in formal words, but every single customer is going to be faced with that sort of psychological decision. Will I enjoy this experience? I get all the formal stuff, but will I actually enjoy it? And I think everyone in events and hospitality has to face that point.
And what we have seen is we've had a real mixture of different customers, from young to older customers, and they all have different concepts of how rules are interpreted and how strict people think they should be sort of taking these rules. And we have to try and be as strict as possible. So for example, we are really strict about wearing the mask indoors. and we try and uphold it as much as possible we can. And from a perspective of the security, if you're not asked to keep your mask on, we'll have to ask you to leave. If it's one rule it needs to be one rule for everyone, and not just for people who, for example, we've had customers who come now, girls who say they're exempt without exempt cards just because they want to keep their makeup all nice for the day. And lo and behold, they pull a mask out of the bag. So it's stuff like that we really need to sort of roll in this together. It's all about keeping people safe. So yeah, policies and procedures need to be upheld.
I mean, one of the underlying points about this whole lockdown period, or how one defines the last 15 months, is that it's made everything more local, that they're more aware of, they're more in love with, they're enjoying more than ever previously because they've experienced it more and differently. Do you think that provides you with an opportunity going forwards, that sense of local?
I think from our perspective, it definitely does. We've seen a massive buy into the brand. More so, you talked about trust earlier. With any sports club, regardless to what happens year to year, you do kind of have a churn of fans. There's people who come and go, they love you, then they hate you, and you have highs and lows, you win things and lose things, and it's pretty fickle sometimes. And also we have some real loyal fans who are there through thick and thin. But I think from what we've definitely seen, and again, through our numbers and through just engagement and contact, we've seen a massive uplift in that sort of desire to become part of Cardiff Rugby, because we represent them, the team, the professional team that they can associate to, that's closest to where they live. And it's been an interesting sort of journey that we've gone on the last 6 months, because I was talking last week actually to our head of marketing, and he was saying that he's never seen so much positivity around all the different things that we do. We normally announce a player signing and get 20 comments, we're getting 200, and it's just kind of massively improved from an affiliation perspective. So yeah, I think there probably is an element of the fact that we see the local representation as an important part of who they are and what they stand for, based on the fact they've been here for the last 18 months and be able to leave.
And for the others, both at that lockdown making everything local point, but also slightly more broadly about Cardiff when it is fully able to and permitted by government to. What's your sense of Cardiff bounce back ability?
I'll come in there, Greg. I think, I'm in Newport, but I consider myself Cardiff as well. I think we'll have that bounce back ability. People want to come out, the ticket sales are there. There is the hunger. Yes, people want to be safe, but I think, we're demonstrating that in all the places we work. So I think we will come back, for forward bookings for us as a resort, which is conferences, which are coming to Wales. Pharmaceuticals are very high for the first quarter next year. And that makes me think they know something I don't know. Pharmaceuticals I probably haven't seen at the resort for 4 or 5 years coming back. So, that is good. So I do think we'll bounce back as soon as we have that timeline, as soon as we have dates. We're all out there selling, and we're out there selling for reasons of cash flow, for reasons of being organised once that event's come. But I think we'll see that other surge once people know that we are open for business and that people come. So I think we will bounce back quite quickly. The other side of that is the staffing for actually that bounce back in the shortage in the sector, which we all probably know about on this call, and getting those people back to work. So you're balancing. We've got a cap, which is our COVID cap, and then we have a staffing cap. At the moment, we're at our staffing cap because we haven't got the staff we need to hit our COVID cap. So it is that capping of our business, which we don't really want to do, but we have to do that to make sure everybody gets an enjoyable experience.
And that starting point, there appear to be various reasons, and Brexit is perhaps one of the factors, but the other is that it's said that with the furlough scheme, people think, well, you know what, if I can get 80% and not do anything in some cases, then that's actually easier to do than real work. But with the furlough scheme unwinding, presumably that factor will disappear and people will wish employment in hospitality and events again.
Yeah, I think I was reading an article yesterday where our available jobs out there as never seemed to be this large since 2008, 275,000 jobs. I think it was somebody from Conway or North saying things across the UK. And the issue is the over 50s have gone more part-time as well. So there was 30% of people employed over 50 as well. They've decided to go part-time or take less hours. Yes, there's the people on furlough who are quite happy on the 80%, so not looking for the jobs, but when that ends, will they come back into it? And we actually saw that, Greg, when we called people back off. We had an awful lot of people resigning, that they've been on the 80%, but then resigning and taking other jobs that they had. Because as we all know, hospitality and events are not the best hours.
Let's go on to one of the deeper points that many have observed this, that the we've got as a nation, or United Nations as it were, we've got in touch with more thoughtful collective values. We've had a deeper sense of what it is to be, dare I say, human. Do you think that some of those values will endure going forwards whenever we are back, whatever back means? And if so, how might that benefit what you're each doing?
I think from our perspective, as we've seen people come back to events, just the engagement level from, I mean, the event we do that we've been allowed to do recently is called the Street Food Social, and very much for the fact that it is back to being sociable with people. We spent the last 14 months on being all digital on Zoom calls, and I think, as we've mentioned before, that just being able to see someone face to face makes all the difference. And people come into our events, the enjoyment levels, and as Reece said, we've seen it on our engagement levels online. It's just, it's through the roof. And I think people have really missed out on that social interaction. So moving forward, I think, people wanting to be out more in terms of going to events. I think looking what you just touched on before about the bounce back ability, when we are allowed to do these things, that social ability is definitely going to be there.
Yeah, we're amazingly, we're towards the end of our hour already, but I want to finish on one last area of advice. Two ways, one to you and one from you. So what has been the smart advice that you've had in these times from wherever, clients, customers, friends, business partners, etc.? But also, if you had one piece of advice for those considering organising an event or planning the return for events, what would it be? So from you and to you, who'd like to be first on this one? Fern, maybe. Do you want to have a go at this? Smart piece of advice that you've received in recent times.
To myself, keep learning, keep being inquisitive, keep researching, keep up to date with what's happening, the way things are moving, what platforms are out there, etc., etc. And to event organisers and event venues, pick up the phone, don't try and guess anything to do with virtual and hybrid. You need to speak to the people that know what they're doing. I had a call last week for a conference from a venue, and they wanted to put a laptop with Zoom on a poser table in front of the speaker with a big conference behind them. Well, that's just not going to cut the mustard. So pick up the phone and speak to us.
So there you go. The advice is talk with Genera about how they can improve your business. Who would have thought that? Other types of advice either you've heard or you'd like to give events organisers, and the other three.
Sorry, you go first, Reece. Was that you, Reece, or Nick?
No, let's have Jill first.
Okay, sorry. So advice people give to me is stop fighting, Jill, you're not going to change the world. And, at times I feel quite defeated that events are not getting reopened when I know how safe they are. And I take that quite personally, being the chair of VWAG. It's something that at times I wish I never stepped forward. I think I put my hand up on the wrong time on a first Zoom call, not really understanding what I was doing. I was going to ask a question. And now I'm still it, because everybody's going, yes, carry on, Jill. So to me, we can't change the world if we want to do it, and we can't change those rules and regulations. And constantly to myself, I'm balancing that lives and livelihood, and knowing both are as important as each other. So that's my people advice give to me. And then advice to others is that as well, you have to be kind to yourself. We are changing a lot. There's lots going on in my head, in others' head, and with us, we unfortunately get quite a lot of complaints at the Celtic Manor that we're not answering our phones to take all the bookings. So it is to my team members, we can only do what we can do, and what you're doing at that moment, just do it to the best of your ability, and events will come back and bookings will come back, and just have faith in that, and we will get back to what we used to. But take into account, as you said, Greg, will we keep those learnings that we felt were better, like baking banana bread, whatever you did? I believe in 2 years' time, I will still be back to normal Jill. These 2 years would probably have gone past me and I'll be back to normal Jill. I wish I could change, but I don't think I will. Perhaps it's just my age, but good luck to those who change.
Who knows? We're all navigating this and experiencing it. Whilst it's collectively the same, individually it's quite different. Reece,
yeah, definitely.
We were a company called Two Circles, who were a data analysis business working specifically in sport. They're world leading and have helped us no end through this. And one of the key things they talked about 8 months ago was two key things. One I've touched on already was keep creating good content. So regardless whether you've got an event or not, you want to engage people. So make sure what you're putting out. Don't just do things for the sake of it. Make sure it's valuable and worthwhile. And the other thing that they talked about was keeping in touch. So, keep giving people an opportunity to engage with your brand, whether that's sponsors, punters, fans, whatever it might be. Give them the chance to touch base with you once, regularly as you possibly can, I guess. So that was the key thing that we stuck to and tried to deliver on throughout the whole pandemic. And then the one that I give people, I guess, is one thing that we've changed. We always had to plan and prepare and stuff for different events, but I think that goes a whole different level now. I think when you're looking at running an event, your plan and your prep and the detail behind those things has to be so significant to make sure that you've nailed it, that you can't cut any corners. I'm not saying anybody cuts corners on this call, of course, but I'm just saying that perhaps now more than ever, you really can't. So the advice would be, make sure all your documentation is where it needs to be and you're bulletproof basically. And as soon as you get the green light, then you can go for it. And you've got everything in place to press the button to crack on.
Sounds like another sporting piece of advice, which is control the controllables.
Absolutely.
I seem to remember the footballer Tony Adams was very big on that. I say that I'm a Boston fan. He was the boss of that at the time, and he didn't really control the controllables at all. Nick, your thoughts?
I think in terms of what I've learned over lockdown is a little bit of self-reflection in terms of how far we come as a company since we started. I think we were motor on and just continually doing event after event, and it wasn't until March last year that we actually sat back and realised where we've come from. So that was great piece in itself, and I think also given time to have a bit of brain space from events, because it is a hectic world and there is a lot going on when you're in the thick of it. Just having that time to really have a think about where we've come from, I suppose. And then just echoing, I suppose, advice from both what from everyone said, really. If you are planning to do events in the current circumstances, you really need to make sure that you're reading up on the guidelines, what the current restrictions are, what you can and can't do. And making sure you've got policies in place and make sure you've got the bodies in place as well. It's all good and well having those policies, but you haven't got the staff to implement it, then you'll struggle. So yeah, that's my bit of advice.
Thank you all. My own piece of advice is, if it's not hubristic to say it, is probably a couple. One is keep on keeping on, which is easier to say, but bloody hard to do at times. But the other is, and it's been brought out in this discussion and elsewhere, of course, remember that what you do is much loved and much missed, and hence the desire for all forms of events to come back. There is extraordinary support out there if we can just get to the position where we can all act fully as we would wish to do. I'm going to close now, and thank you to all all four speakers today. Really, really interesting discussion. That's with Jill Manley, ICC Wales and Celtic Manor, Fern Morgan, Genera Productions, Nick Saunders, Depot, and Reece Bloomberg, Cardiff Blues, Cardiff Rugby. Thank you for your time today. Of course, thanks to everyone for watching today and subsequently on YouTube, and for your support for Cardiff Life. Please, please, please don't forget to enter the Cardiff Life Awards, closing next Thursday, June 10. Good luck in the coming months to everyone as we all navigate through these times. This has been a Media Clash production, and this has been the latest Cardiff Life Business Club. Cardiff together, always. Thank you.